It's not dependency.
It's not dependency. So if we start going that way, that's what we end up with. But emptiness is saying not two, no duality. When we come out of that, and not intellectually, experientially, when we come out of that, what we realize is dependency is not two things with a connection.
It's one.
There's connection which creates the two things.
Oh, it's hard to comprehend.
There's only perspective. That's duality. That's dependency. Real at the subtlest level. So we can only appreciate that if we get rid of this. And we can only do that by realizing emptiness. And then from that, we understand relationship. And the relationship creates the two things. You know, big and small.
Yeah.
Dependency doesn't mean here's big and here's small and they're connected. We have the relationship of size which creates big and small. Not two. So there's not two. It's not like one and one separate, that they're joined. That's emptiness. So if we appreciate that, we appreciate this.
And how do you see it in the way if you talk about persons? Because it's very easy to understand big and small.
Yeah.
About the relationship between two people.
Yeah. Again, this is not something that we are going to intellectually figure out. Because our intellectual mind is conceptual, dualistic. So myself and many people I know, when I first got into this, I wanted to figure it out because I'm very analytical. I want to figure this out. Of course you can get some idea what it sort of means, but you cannot figure it out with the intellectual mind. Because not two, non-duality is not something the intellectual mind can experience. Because the intellectual mind is dualistic. So you have to then bring this idea into meditation and experience this in meditation. Of course, beyond the conceptual intellectual mind, direct experience. In that direct experience of emptiness, that is a completely non-dualistic experience. And when we come out of that, then we know emptiness. Not we understand emptiness, we know because we've experienced it directly. And when we experience that and we come out of that, and someone asks you, tell me about emptiness, what emptiness is, your experience, you'll go, sort of like this, sort of like that. You won't be able to use words to describe that experience because it's a non-dualistic experience. Yeah, so you can use examples and metaphors and analogies, and that's all you can do. So again, I think what we need to be careful of is not just saying, I want to figure it out. Of course, it's good to get an intellectual understanding of the concepts, but then we need to apply it. We need to meditate. Because even if we could somehow figure it out intellectually, so what? Our life's not going to change. I mean, we've figured out lots of things intellectually, and our life hasn't really improved much. We need to bring it into experience. You know, intellectually we've figured out impermanence, no problem, but that's not helping us. We need to bring it into experience. If we meditate, have a taste of emptiness, then our life will dramatically improve.
So now I think the dualism is only because we invented the time. Because if there's no time, no? Because there's first and second only because our...
We created the concept of time, and we had to do that, otherwise we couldn't function.
Okay.
So there's no problem with that. The problem is we think time is real, existing objectively. That's the problem.
We need time to function, but we can't understand, I think, non-duality because we have the concept of time. So, like when we walk, there's the first...
I think if you realize emptiness and you come out of it, you'll still have an idea of time. But you'll know that time is not objective. You'll know time is also interdependent. Of course. So it's not like time will disappear once we've realized emptiness. It's just our understanding of it will be accurate.
Sure, but understanding emptiness is non-dualism, no?
Sure. Down the back. What?
There is no self.
Right, but that, remember, that doesn't mean there's no me, no person.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And no self wants things, wants to be food, wants. There is a movement. There is a movement in the no self.
Yes. No self means there is a dependent me. A dependent me who wants to improve myself, a dependent me who wants to get rid of my faults, a dependent me who's trying to be compassionate to others.
How the no self moves to those things? I would like to continue about
Remember, I think your question is the dilemma of the two extremes.
No.
So, no self means we realize me exists dependently. That's the same. So there's a dependent me here, and this dependent me wants to improve myself. I want to get rid of my mental afflictions and suffering, and I want to be compassionate to others. Huh?
What do you want in ourselves?
Where does motivation come from?
The motivation comes from understanding how you exist. That we are interdependent and we see suffering in ourselves and everyone else. There's the motivation. Spontaneous motivation to overcome our own suffering and the suffering of others. Now that motivation doesn't come because we grasp onto self and we go, I couldn't care what happens to them. Because it's me here, I only care about this.
So to say that if I understand the no self is the motivation to care?
If we realize no self, then instead of a motivation of me, and I don't care about others and so forth, the motivation will come from connecting with how we really exist, and the spontaneous motivation, not thinking, spontaneous, will be loving kindness and compassion for ourselves and others. We don't have to think about it. It's just natural. And it's there all the time. And that's driving our very life.
Where does that exist?
Huh?
Like you can also question where does that exist?
It exists as a dependent arising. Causes, conditions, parts, labeling, like everything. Remember, because things are empty, things exist and they function.
I think I'd like to share that I'm feeling a little bit frustrated
Very good.
with everything.
Good.
No, wait.
Oh.
I think what I need maybe, well, everything sounds extremely logic, right?
Right.
And methodical and structured.
Right.
But I don't want to turn it into some kind of logical practice.
No, don't do
Or
that.
a logical exercise. I really don't want to. Because
No, don't.
that's my tendency, and also because you say not
Sure.
to do it and not
Sure.
to do it and not
Sure.
to do it.
Yes.
But the experience I've accomplished so far as a beginner practitioner is not enough refined to establish upon any of these
Sure.
conclusions.
Sure.
So I'm a little bit, I feel like this is premature for me anyway. And I think what I'm seeking is for your acknowledgement
Sure.
for that. It might take between 5 to a lifetime of years to comprehend deeply some of it.
Yeah.
Because right now it sounds like,
Sure.
oh, maybe I should talk to someone who
Sure.
took notes
Sure.
or copy something, like,
Sure.
you know, like the same retarded kid
Sure.
I was at school. But no, this is
Sure.
really
Right.
a lot to comprehend. And
So what I'm trying to do a little bit is provide a little bit of a roadmap. Because if we don't have a roadmap, even if we want to go to a faraway place, we're not anywhere near it unless we have sort of the roadmap of how to get there. Where do we start? You know, do we go this way or do we go this way? I mean, I'm here, the result is, you know, way over there somewhere, but I need sort of a map. Now, what you can have, of course, is if someone's holding your hand, they can say, start going there. and you start going there, and then they're holding your hand, and then they say, okay, now go this way, go that way, and they can hold your hand all the way. Very good. But it's not easy to find a person who can hold your hand in every step of the way. So then, it would be also helpful if we can have a bit of a road map so that we know we've got to go this, this, and this. But then, of course, no point in examining the map that's hundreds of kilometres down the road. Then, once we sort of know the overall map, then we traverse this part of the map we're on. We focus there. Otherwise, of course, we can think about all sorts of things in the future, but then we're not actually focusing on the thing that we work now. So we need to be careful. And there's this expression, the map is not the territory. So we use the map to navigate the territory. Otherwise, it's a great danger, and I fell into this when I first started, is I produced quite an elaborate map. And I go, wow, that's a really nice map. Stick it on the wall and admire it. Wow, geez, Buddhism's got a very good map. Fantastic. And then, of course, we don't take any steps. We don't go anywhere. Well, it's amazing. It's a wonderful map. You know, I'm Buddhist. I like this Buddhist map. I'm a Buddhist. But we don't do anything. So we don't want to do that. And I think this is part of your point, is that we need to make steps. And there are many ways of doing that. One, of course, it'd be fantastic if we had someone who could grab our hand and say, follow me. But of course, one danger with that is, are they to be trusted? And unfortunately, what we see in the modern world, a lot of people come around now saying, I know the way, trust me, follow me. And people do, and they end up in not a very good place. So if we're going to follow that approach, we need to really make sure that the person who's holding our hand is trustworthy. Otherwise, we end up in all sorts of not so nice places. But we can use a sort of whatever approach we resonate with and that works for us. But and in all of that, there is a great range of possibilities, from simply holding the hand and trusting and following step by step, or having the bigger picture, navigating a bit ourselves, and then asking questions when we sort of get a bit lost in our way. So all of this is possible, and I think we as an individual need to find what is the most effective approach for us.
Me?
Yeah.
During the meditation,
Yeah.
I disidentified with many things, like thoughts were just thinking themselves, emotions were coming and going, the memories.
Sure. They had no owner.
Yeah, they just happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up with just the observer. The question is where to go from there.
The question then, yeah, exactly, this often happens. The next question is, who's the observer? That's the question to ask. Because that's often what happens, is that, you know, when we do this observation, as you said, it's not that difficult to understand that we're not the body and we're not these mental events. You know, that's not so difficult. But then we sort of come back from that and we go, well, actually, there's something or someone who's seeing all of this stuff, the body, the thoughts, that's me. And then we hold on to that. So then the next question is, who's the observer? Turn your attention from the body and the thoughts and mental content, turn your attention on the observer and see what you find. That's the next step. Not findable.
That's it. And I want to see to understand the connection between this. You talk about it, but maybe I need to
Sure.
fit between this to compassion and love and caring and being connected to others.
Right. So,
I can understand
exactly.
being connected that I'm not here in life. It's like
Right.
to life that I
So then
come here.
if there's no separate me, and then you see suffering arising, you just want for that to overcome that. No? And that suffering that is arising could be within this body and mind, or could be somewhere else. But when you realize there's no separation, it's just suffering.
I didn't realize the no separation, just realized the existence of nothing.
No. You didn't realize you're nothing.
I realized that there is
nothing to be found.
Nothing to be found.
Correct.
Existence somehow.
Exactly.
Everybody's
right. And again, intellectually, we're not going to probably make much sense of that, because intellectually that is beyond the conceptual mind, this experience. So then if we're trying to intellectually go, well, how does that work with compassion? I think it's going to be difficult. Whereas if you do this meditation, you have this experience, and particularly if you have some shamatha, it will have quite a strong effect on your mind. And then have a look what happens outside of the meditation. I think what you're going to find is that your mind will be much more calm, your mental afflictions will be much less, and you'll just feel this spontaneous connection to everyone. And if they're suffering, you'll just want to help. You won't be thinking, I don't like them, I'm not going to help them.
That's what I have, but I want to know, maybe I wanted to know the connection, like, from the connection mind.
Yeah, it's not so easy, I think. Yeah.
Like
because our intellectual mind is looking at this. You know, that there's me and them, there's a connection, but still, how does that mean compassion? But what for this question here is, it's not like me and them and connection. There's just the connection, which means there's just suffering, and then you'll just want to alleviate that. Whether it's here or here, it's sort of not, it's irrelevant. It's just suffering. Let's fix it. And so you'll find that you won't need to think about it. It'll just be spontaneous. Because of causes and conditions. That suffering is causes and conditions, mental afflictions is causes and conditions. It's so the logical conclusion of that is that they didn't sort of pop into existence at some time. It's a little bit like the physical world, you know. We talk about the origins of the universe. And of course also in the physical world everything has causes and conditions. And then when they talk about origins of the universe, usually one of the most popular theories is the Big Bang. But of course the Big Bang doesn't mean the universe came from nothing. There was usually the way it's explained is some infinitesimally dense something that sort of exploded. So there was something there. It wasn't like the universe popped into existence from nothing. And so one of the fundamental principles of classical physics, of course, is conservation of mass energy. You can't create it, you can't destroy it. So there's just a flow. And I think one theory of the origin of the universe now is what's called multiple Big Bang. You know, that prior to the Big Bang there was a universe that somehow collapsed, and then there's another one. So that's one theory that's around. And actually that theory is quite similar to the Buddhist theory of the universe, this sort of multiple Big Bang theory. So where am I going with that? So similarly at the physical level, the mental level is the same. That in Buddhism there's similar theory of conservation of mass of consciousness. You can't create it, you can't destroy it, which means everything has a cause, which means mental afflictions have a cause, everything has a cause, which means it wasn't sort of we were okay at one point and then suddenly there was ignorance and suddenly there was suffering. So the logical conclusion, like the physical world, it's beginningless. I mean, the physical world is beginningless, according to classical physics. Okay, at some point it was very dense, but there was no time where there was nothing and then suddenly something popped into existence. There was no beginning. So same for Buddhism, same theory, no beginning.
So we started with ignorance and now we're endlessly trying to be clear.
But what the Buddhist assertion is that, yes, it's beginningless, but we have a remedy for it. That this ignorance we can eliminate.
I don't know, maybe I'm talking like too philosophical, but say why? Why do we need to be born with this ignorance and we're kind
Why
of...
we what, sir?
Why are we born with this ignorance? Why do we need to...
Why? Because it was there before. Because it was there before. Yeah.
Let's say someone doesn't accept Buddhism, the philosophy of Buddhism, or
Sure.
the psychology of Buddhism.
Sure.
Where does it leave me? Where does it leave me with the practice? I
Uh,
wasn't convinced. For instance,
Right.
I'm saying
Okay.
practically, let's
Yeah,
say
sure.
I wasn't.
Sure.
I thoroughly understood.
Right. Okay. Well.
Intellectually, the.
Okay. Sure.
But
Okay.
I'm not convinced.
Sure. Then, and in fact, from a Buddhist perspective, you know, we talk about ethics, concentration, wisdom. They're listed in that order for a reason. We don't start with wisdom first. We start with ethics. So, I think, you know, ethics, I think in any tradition and any meaningful way of life is the basis. You know, stop harming others and try and help them. So, I think we can't really argue so much about that. And then on that basis, the next step in Buddhism is concentration, to develop a calm, clear and focused mind. I think everyone wants that, no? To have a calm, clear, focused mind. And so then on that basis, then we can really start to look at these ideas and see whether it's something correct or not. And also, of course, the idea of impermanence, I think, it's been proven by science, so can't argue with that. So we can start there. So we can start with these practices, and then I think you'll find that as they develop, then you can more naturally move to the next level rather than just sort of blindly following something. Because, in fact, in Buddhism, it's not recommended to blindly accept anything. It's not helpful. We have to check it out and see whether it's something that's valid and something useful for us, and then only then take it on board.
So what you're saying that eventually you'll have to accept.
No, eventually
Let's say
you.
that someone is a philosopher,
Right.
is a naive realist,
Right.
and there are quite eminent philosophers
Sure.
which are naive
Sure.
realists, and
Sure.
they are, let's say that they would practice Buddhism.
Right. So then, well, then Buddhism would
So
say.
you never achieve Nibbana because
No, Buddhism would say if we start practicing it in this way, then it's not like somehow Buddhism's trying to convince people to think in a different way. Buddhism's saying, please investigate things and see what you discover. And then what we discover is what we discover. The Buddha's assertion, of course, is that we discover this, but we check it out and see what happens. So it's not a matter of trying to convert someone to Buddhism. I mean, that's not helpful at all. But Buddhism is offering a mechanism to develop ourselves and then see where that takes us. That's all. And we can do as much or little of that as we want. I mean, it's our life. We choose what we want to do.
You know that Buddhism brought many Jewish to be more, to be closer to, let's say, me,
Yeah.
and many others, because the philosophy
Yeah, sure.
is the same.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, and then we'll break. Oh no, we've still got 5 minutes left for more question. But often when the Dalai Lama is giving public talks in many countries, and most of the people, of course, are not Buddhists in the audience, he often says, please do not convert to Buddhism. It's not good for you. He says, if you grew up in a particular tradition that is working for you, if you try and change to Buddhism, you may get confused and have problems. So he says, don't convert to Buddhism. He says, but if there's anything I'm telling here that can help you to be a better Christian, Jew, whatever, Hindu, use it. Or to be a better atheist, just use it. And he says sometimes if you didn't grow up in a tradition, or the tradition you grew up with is not really benefiting you, then please take this on board if it's helpful. And then eventually, if you want to call yourself a Buddhist, that's okay. But trying to convert to Buddhism is not helpful.
mentioned very briefly, and that is really defined by our conception that we exist independently.
Sure.
It's death. But when we exist independently,
When we exist independently?
yeah, like we
Think.
think, and then we stop exist when we die. That's how I see it. That's how
I mean, of course, to the scientific materialistic view that the mind is a property of the brain finishes at death. I mean, no one argues that. So yes, from that perspective, then the person is finished.
Yeah. So what I think I'm trying to say is that just we lose. I think when we look at reality through the goggles of emptiness, we start to lose the self, not much to lose the ego, but we also lose, I think, a big part of being alive, which is death. Like the fear of death. I don't think you have to be depressed or pessimist. I think we organize our lives around it in a way that we don't even realize.
Often,
we try not to die all day.
right.
We don't have to do anything.
But there's two things here. There's the fear of death and appreciating that we're going to die one day. Usually the fear of death, if it's strong, paralyzes us. Doesn't do us any good.
Without even getting paralyzed, I think that it's a whole. Because looking at the world through emptiness changes everything about death. Because
Exactly.
then I don't really know. I feel like it's a big deal, and I wonder maybe through explaining how Buddhism views
Sure.
death and
I mean,
emptiness and death.
yeah. I mean, then we'll break for lunch. But generally, in the Buddhist path, one of the first things we start to reflect on before emptiness or anything is we reflect on the fact that we've got a precious human, what's called precious human life. We're human. We've got intelligence, we've got good conditions, we can do something useful with our life. That's the first reflection. Following that, the next reflection is, that's not going to last forever. Reflection on death. And the idea to reflect on that is not so to feel depressed, but rather understand that we've got a precious opportunity here, let's use it while we've got it. And so this is the reflection on death. And of course, the Buddhist assertion is that with the mind is not the brain, so when this body shuts down at the end of the life, there's continuity. There's continuity. And where we end up is, from a Buddhist perspective, determined by how we lead our lives. So if we lead a good life, we end up in a good place. And so therefore, by reflecting on death, we'll go, okay, I've got a great opportunity here. Let's make my life useful and meaningful, not only to have a more meaningful life now, but also then I'll be heading in a better direction for my next life. So this is the way of looking at death from a Buddhist perspective. Is that your question?
I wasn't sure to begin with. What was my question?
I wasn't sure either. I wasn't sure either.
But I think maybe my point is that now it can take away a big part of what we obsess about, which is this, not only...
You mean that's a good thing or a bad
also
thing?
death.
You mean it's a good thing or a bad thing?
It's frightening, but...
What, to take it away?
It's really, it's a paradox, because it's frightening not to think about death in the way we know it, in a way, but it's liberating. It can be really liberating. Yeah. It's like losing the self, it's losing a big part of...
Yeah, but again here, the only thing we're losing, is a false sense of me, which just creates a mess in our life. That's what we're missing out on. Maybe that's a good thing to miss out on. So we're not talking about missing out on life through doing emptiness. We're talking about appreciating life more fully because of emptiness, in a much better way. So what we're doing is we're not missing out, we're missing out on all the suffering and mess in our life. And what emptiness is really saying is that that is then opening up our life in a whole new way that is going to be much more meaningful and rewarding. I think that's sort of what it's saying.
Yeah, I think it's a positive thing.
Yeah. Okay, let's stop there. It's time for lunch. Before you rush off, wait. Technically, the silence is finished now, but hang on. I think it's nice if we can stay silent for lunch, so it's not a big mess over at lunch. So once you come out of the dining room, then we can go out of silence. So I think it's good to stay silent in the dining room, otherwise it's going to be quite chaotic. So as soon as you come out of lunch, then silence is finished. See you at 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
In a minute, we have another announcement.